Hi guys, welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast. It is me, Steve Hall, and on the other end, Pascal Floor. Pascal we were just talking off air, he's now periodized his facial hair to be mustache mode, and I've moved away from the mustache. Maybe that's what kind of led you to be like, now it's my turn. I'll take the helm there and rock the mustache.
Yeah, to be fair, now that you are getting a lot of tattoos again, right? I'm just like, I'm itching to get back again to getting a tattoo once again. I mean, a couple of years back, I actually then sent a couple of sketches over to my tattoo parlor, and he was saying like, no, this won't look good, especially whenever you're aging, especially on the neck.
Oh,
right?
I like the neck ones.
But it really needs to be something that doesn't really have a lot of details in there, because it just like otherwise looks very crappy. And I never really had any kind of other ideas. I mean, I always wanted to get a lot of anime tattoos, but I don't think he's the right one for the job. That's why I never really suggested anything to him. And now that you are actually getting some Dragon Ball Z tattoos, I'm just like, holy shit, no. Now it looks like I'm a copycat or so. And now with his mustache as well. Yeah, Katie very much likes the mustache. And I also do like it, but I said to you already, I only enjoy it, also just like facial hair on me at least, whenever I'm a little bit on the leaner side of things when it comes to my face, because I tend to have more like a balloon face. And whenever I'm then... So when I'm gaining, right, and whenever I'm then having some facial hair as well, it just like adds size to the face, which I don't want. So, and right now, mustache time, and I think it's about time to have something like this once again.
I've never heard it described as balloon face. I love that. I don't know what it's normally described as, to be honest. While I think
moon face is something that many people say, right? But balloon, it's just like you can inflate it if you want to, right? At times, and then at times you can actually then shrink it again.
I have a shout out to Jono, one of my longest term clients. He'll know. I don't know if he actually listens to these, but he has like his off-season face looks like my like contest prep face. So when he diets, he gets like properly like he looks like death face. Like you can just see his skull. And I have another client who I met up with recently. Shout out to Nick. He has got like already. He's in prep. He's very lean actually. He's in a good spot, but he's already got like skull face going on, and I'm like, I just never really get that skull face. I think you're the same as me. We have like quite a softer. We hold the cheeks fairly well. So even when I'm like shredded to the bone, it's like, I mean, my face is okay.
To be fair though, I've never been as lean as you have in the past.
You've been lean though.
I've been lean, but not to the same extent, right? And with the old video footage where we've trained at MuscleWorks and the WMBF, I could see that my facial muscles were working when I was actually then talking or eating, which is not really the case anymore, but never really skeleton face though.
No, I'm like, it's the same with, actually, this is another one. Did you ever get pain sitting down? Like, did you ever have it where it's uncomfortable to sit on your butt? Because people talk about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, not to the extent where I'm just sitting down and I have like massive pain in my glutes, but it's more like when it's not very much, when there's not a lot of cushion or so, right? So it's just, I don't know, a bench or just a normal typical bench that you find in a park. I couldn't really sit down there at a certain angle where then the bones are actually then really pointing downwards. Right? But if I would just like lean back a little bit more, make myself comfortable, then it was still all right.
Just because maybe it was because this prep, I basically stood the majority of the day and I didn't sit that much. But I've never really had that where it's like painful to sit, like, because people talk about how like it's kind of painful or really uncomfortable. I can't even remember it ever being a problem for me. I guess I had more fat to come off the rear of the glutes for sure, but they got fairly lean.
But you also have a very, very decent amount of muscle mass sitting on your butt.
Brett would be a good person to ask. Has he ever had like issues sitting down? Because his is shredded. Also,
one more thing that is very much unimportant for the listeners, basically, but this is just what we do here. Back in the days when I was still dating, I found it so misleading when someone had like a Jono face. Let's call it Jono face, right? Someone who is actually quite heavy, but has the face of a lean person. Because to be fair, and this is not meant in an offensive way, but maybe this has also to do because I was very, very obese when I was younger, but I don't really like when girls or women carry too much of fat. This is just me, right? I also don't like when they are overly skinny, though. It must be said, right? But I didn't really like when they were chubbier. That's just not something. No, that's something that I didn't find attractive. When someone else does, totally fine. However, I found it always so misleading when I was swiping through Tinder and someone was just like doing selfies. They had a beautiful face, and then I was actually meeting up in real life, and I was just like, holy shit, you're like 20 to 30 kilograms heavier than I expected, right?
That's a lot of extra weight.
yeah. But you do know those type of female bodies in particularly. Sometimes males also have a body shape like this, but it's very, very rare, where then especially the lower extremities are just like this. And it sounds...
I've seen it on a few guys as well.
Yeah.
I can think
some
of
guys I've seen it as well, but it's much, much rarer. Much, much rarer. And I know how kind of... It sounds a little bit condescending, but it isn't. It's just like some genetic traits that more females have than men. And that is then where most of the weight was carried, in the legs and also the glutes and, around the hips.
Don't mind a bit of glute weight. It's all good.
Yeah.
The booty. Although that's changed, hasn't it? People's preferences and tastes. But I actually, in some ways, I know a lot of people actually find the off-season face really hard to like get through. Like I know personally, like I prefer my leaner face, and because it's something you see all the time, so if you have quite a dramatic face transformation, I can see that like gaining phases may even be tougher for you, because I see it with some competitors where they really visually like, and I'm sure people have noticed it with me on my like stories. They're like, oh Steve, your face like suddenly got like much rounder. And yeah, it can be hard for people to accept. I definitely have struggled with it in the past, like just like how my face looks. I just don't like it when it's like big and round, but now like I've done this long enough where I'm just like, it's just my face, like I just accept it. But if you're dating and single, I could see that becoming even more of a thing, because I mean the face is like you that's how you get the door open sometimes with some people, let alone the rest. That's a kind of a later thing to get over. And there's this. I have one other thing. Sorry, I was just going to say on my client Nick reminded me of this, and I'm interested to hear from competitors who are listening. He said, "Is there something called like a competitor's nose?" He said he's always got a runny nose, and I was trying to think. The only time I can remember in prep where I constantly had a runny nose was on like a show day. For some reason, on show days, I always have like this like tan runny nose. I always remember because it's like the tan is also associated with the runniness for some reason. I don't know if you experience like the runny nose, like just like a constant.
I think everyone is well aware of when it's cold outside, for example, and when your entire body temperature is a little bit down, you're freezing, then you start to actually create kind of that, I always like to call it dog nose, where it's like a cold and wet nose that is always sniffing the entire time. That is often only happening when I'm very much kind of freezing. And I would assume that in a prep, you are much, much leaner, that perhaps your body temperature is just like off by, I don't know, 0.1, 0.2 degrees or so. And that is enough to actually make you freeze more often. And this is just purely assumptions, because I didn't really have it. The only time that I was freezing was on that one holiday weekend where we went to the Baltic Sea. It was just awful because there was also awful weather there, but I perceived it as so much colder than it probably actually was. So yeah, can't really help there.
I guess I kind of led us into a discussion surrounding a very random topic. I don't really know how we got there. But actually, let's go for an update, because I wonder if people know this, because I don't think you've talked about it. Where are you now comparative to stage, like in terms of body weight, and just like general? I don't know if there's anything else, like maybe food, I'm not sure.
So here in the morning, I weighed in at 75.8, which is not too far off from where I ended the contest prep. But also, to be fair, I think I had an easy 3 kilograms more in me to actually get rid of before I would have been like competitive lean. And that's why
you were definitely competitive lean, by the way. You were. You're one of, in your class, maybe the most conditioned novice. I can't actually completely remember.
That's true. But I just think that there were just like still body parts that were still carrying a decent amount of fat. And I think I could have easily, with plenty of time, gotten there. And I think that the estimation that we set at some point of being around 69 to 70 kilograms, like very, very diced, was actually turning out to be, I think, very much on point. And the 72.3, which was my lowest weigh-in to date, was also depleted, in a depleted state and all that kind of stuff. So it needs to be taken into consideration with everything that now goes into it when you're just like taking a look at it from that perspective of 75.8 in comparison to 72.3. Doesn't really
you're
sound
still
like
really lean.
Yeah, it doesn't really sound like a lot, but I'm feeling absolutely amazing, to be honest. I'm feeling super recovered, super fresh. Don't have any kind of hunger cravings or anything alike. It's not that my sleep is suffering or anything alike, or that I'm irritable or so. And this is something that I told you as well when I was actually fading out of it, that I'm feeling good, right? And then I bumped up the calories. Now I'm sitting above it to a decent extent. And I can push it a little bit further, but right now, of course, it's not the time to really push it due to the injuries that I'm carrying. But so far, I wouldn't really push it anyway, like 77, maybe 78 kilograms, and then cut down again to a reasonable level, like a mini cut or so, and then push it another time or so. But yeah, this is where I'm at right now, feeling good. Eating, of course, unfortunately, the calories are low. But this is something that I think I've talked about in one of the previous episodes, and also did an Instagram post about at some point, that in the past, I always gained after a cutting phase way too quickly because I wanted my maintenance to be higher. But in reality, it wasn't, right? And then it ends up being in kind of that vicious cycle where you're then ending up stepping on the scale. The scale weight spikes up very fast. You justify it with glycogen replenishment, with more gut content, with more water being stored. Then you avoid the scale for a short period of time because you don't want it to get to your head. But at the same time, though, you are not honest with yourself about probably that the maintenance is not the maintenance, and the caloric surplus that you're in is way too high. And then you avoid the scale because you don't want to face reality. But because of that denial, you're actually gaining at a way too fast pace. And voila, you've gained way too fast overall. And this is a mistake that I've done so often already, and also something that I've seen already quite a lot of times, which is you're just pissing away time then.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I'm surprised is because that isn't much above stage condition, and you were very conditioned, but obviously there's been a reason why you've held maintenance for a longer period of time, and it's very important, like you mentioned, how good you're feeling, because this is where I was getting onto why I was a little bit like, oh, wow. Because for you tended to hold a bigger physique because of your background, I think. Whereas now, this is probably the longest stretch of time I imagine you've been like legitimately, like you're under 15% body fat for sure. Like you must be like basically at 10% body fat or something at this stage. So that's a long stretch of time for you to have held that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's always so hard to be your own judge when it comes to that.
But you've got definition. Like you must have.
It's not that I'm super chubby or so, but I see, of course, the difference that there's way less overall details to what it was like right after the show or so. But this, of course, is also contributed to the tan is gone. You're not shaved anymore. This all plays into it, and I think that people forget about it. I take a look at myself now, take a look at the time when I was actually then stage ready. It's only a 3 kilogram of difference. It isn't that much. But the look is completely different, of course, due to then also those other factors. And you know how much actually shaving already does play a role, and then a tan on top of it all, it's night and day difference.
Especially if you're hairy and pale.
Yes.
Which I think you're on the hairier side than me. I'm not that hairier guy.
I mean,
but
upper
I'm
body
very
not
pale,
so much, but the legs. I mean, you see no definition when the hair growth has been there. And I didn't take care of the jungle. It's not as crazy as other people have, but it is definitely there. That's for sure. But no, once again, I'm feeling great. And I think, so when I was in my adolescence years and I lost all of the weight, right, I was also pretty lean, to be honest. This had, of course, also other reasons. I was afraid of gaining. I didn't want to once again be a fatter individual. And I also was quite active from sports to begin with. The only reason why I became obese was because my parents just gave me food whenever I wanted to. And as a kid, you don't know any better. For you, it's just like, oh, I can't have cornflakes here. Let's have cornflakes, right? And that is never a good idea for a kid to make the nutritional choices overall. But I was always active. But of course, this is a typical case of like calories in versus calories out. I was super active as a kid. I was in 3 different sports teams at the same time. I was playing handball, I was playing football, and I was playing cricket. And I was constantly either in a training session or on the weekends playing some kind of game. And still it wasn't enough. Still I was actually gaining a lot of weight, right? And then when I actually then took care of nutrition, I was actually just dropping the weight. And I was able to maintain that quite nicely without any kind of great effort when I was younger. With that then being said, though, when I moved to Berlin, I was then actually, due to alcohol and all that kind of stuff, actually starting to actually get a little bit chubbier again, but I didn't want that to happen. And this is where then a little bit of the fucked up relationship with food was developed, especially because that was the time where we were then stepping on stage more often. I was making money and being in front of the camera as well. And so much focus was actually being put forth on being lean, and that was the time where you just wanted to be as lean as possible. This is where a lot of those negative habits and negative connotations with food actually arose. And it must be said, though, I never felt bad being lean, and I was very skinny during that time. So I think sitting at around like mid-70s shouldn't really be an issue if you really think about it.
But it's nice also to know for people maybe who are listening who, I don't know, maybe they've had that similar experience to you where they have got quite overweight, but then they've managed to like come down, or like maybe they've cycled a little bit like you have, but eventually you can get to a place where you can hold and maintain a muscular, lean physique, which ultimately, like, that's the end goal for a lot of people. Obviously, we want more from ourselves, so we do still go through cycles of being a bit like fatter and a bit leaner and what have you. But for someone who's listening who maybe doesn't want that, like, they can get down into this zone of just like, this is going to be really productive for you. So, and I think one of the benefits people don't talk about, because obviously P ratios became really kind of a hot topic and maybe misunderstood for a period of time, certainly by myself, where I thought kind of once you're not super lean, but like you're lean, you've got a superior partitioning ratio towards muscle versus fat. And as you get fatter, it shifts in the favor of fat. And that doesn't seem to be the case. And now it's become kind of like, oh, you can just mass at any body weight. But I think one of the cool things for a competitor, like for you and me, is when you're leaner, you can see kind of what's going on a little bit more. Whereas when you're really like, I don't know, if you get into like the 20% body fat or like the high teens, like there's just becomes a point where you're like, I can't really see what's going on at that weight. Whereas now you're kind of on the leaner side, you can kind of track your progress a little bit more closely. There's less like things in the way of the muscle, basically. Like the fat isn't hiding the progress as obviously. So I'm excited for this off-season period for you, improvement season actually.
I just want to add something, because it could leave the wrong impression if you're saying like, okay, stay on the leaner side because you then can track the progression a little bit better. Because it must be said that some people just function better at a higher body fat percentage. And if you have a solid training regime and you have great execution, great intent when you're going into the gym, and you take care of other things as well, you don't have to necessarily see the details on a weekly or monthly basis. You can probably tick off the box. And when we're saying something like trust the process, I think it's not so much about trusting the process, but just knowing what it is that you do is productive and that it will yield some results. And you don't necessarily have to then see the changes in the immediate short term to know that something is going on. What do you think about that?
I completely agree. It might sound contradictory. I'm just one of the, I think I was trying to frame it as like specifically for a competitor, maybe one of the kind of pros. A lot of competitors try and stay a bit leaner in their off seasons anyway if they're competing multiple seasons or regularly, because like you don't want to get too far away from the stage because that just makes that journey torturous. So one of the benefits of staying maybe a bit tighter is you can track that or maybe monitor that progress a bit better. But I completely agree with you that like ultimately, what's the thing that grows muscle? Training performance. If you're holding yourself back to be leaner so you can try and monitor some sort of progress, but that's ultimately holding back your training performance, you're not going to make as good progress. So stop kind of wasting time on that, because that's just like a tiny little detail that ultimately doesn't matter at all. And the key thing, like you said, is like training performance is going up. If that's happening, your body weight's going up, even if you can't visually see what's going on under the hood, like you can be pretty certain you're cooking up something really good there. Yeah. And once you take it out of the oven, do your mini cut or your cut, then you're going to see actually, okay, I've produced this. Because I do find people get way too caught up in, I talked about it with Joe Jeffrey, where these people are like, naturals are taking photos every week of their physique. And it's like, I don't think you can monitor changes that quickly, because we're not growing muscle that quickly at all. Maybe it helps keep people accountable. It makes them like not go into like a crazy kind of all you can eat diet, but you can't really go to your client like be like, oh yeah, I can see you've added a small amount to your anterior deltoid this week. I don't know. It's not happening.
No, totally. And this is something that we've talked about in the past already a couple of times. The way that I take pictures, or why I'm taking pictures, is more so for future reference points and also to keep things in a more tight range. So just to ensure that we are not gaining at a too fast of a pace or too slow of a pace. It could very well be that the scale weight is, I don't know, going up, but you keep that conditioning so crazy. And then I think there may be even a justification of pushing it a little bit harder even, right? Not by a lot, because we are talking about naturals here, but just marginally maybe, to make the person maybe even feel even better or fuel the workout even more so and stuff. But I never really take it to analyze of whether we've gained muscle mass in a specific area or not. I think that, especially for natural athletes, you need to have a long time frame in between two similar positions and spots. So let's say 70 kilograms both times, but there's a time gap of 1 year in between, and the circumstances are the same as well. So 70 kilograms in a gaining phase. All right. And it doesn't really matter then in the meanwhile of like overly analyzing the pictures, because you can't really detect those changes.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we pride ourselves on providing personalized service that will take your physique and knowledge to the next level. If you're interested, check the description and sign up.
Yeah. I think you mentioned like a mini cut of sorts in your future. Have you got an idea of when you want that to be? I'm guessing it's not completely pre-planned.
No, it isn't. But I would very much assume that it is going to happen somewhere in the summertime, just because I personally find summertime to be the perfect opportunity for something like that. First off, it's great weather outside. So the likelihood that you are more active because it's lovely weather outside is much, much higher. So for me personally, it's much easier to just like, I have my clothes on right now, just putting my shoes on, and I'm going out on a walk. In the wintertime, it's just kind of a pain to actually do this. So it's way more likely that you're going out, you tank up on the vitamin D, so to speak. And also because of this, because you're more active, your energy expenditure is a little bit higher. And possibly because of that as well, you are less food focused because you are occupying your mind and yourself with other things other than sitting at home and maybe be in an environment of food. Furthermore, I find when it's very hot outside, I tend to lose my hunger. And all of these things combined makes it just so much easier to cut in the summertime than it is to cut in the wintertime. Doesn't mean that I have a hard time cutting through the winter because I just get the job done. But if I can choose, of course, I would always prefer it in the summertime because it is more convenient than the wintertime. So I would very much assume somewhere in the summertime. It doesn't really need to be a long one. Can be 4 weeks or so, 4 to 6 weeks, somewhere around there, right? Just in and out quickly, chop off a little bit of fat so that none of the negative adaptations really come to tuition again, but more so you are maintaining the current status quo in terms of your well-being, but reduce maybe the body fat by 1 to 2 kilograms or so.
Yeah, I don't think I will end up. My plan is not to mini cut during summer, but you've made me see some of the extra benefits that I would feel, because being peak mass or massing during summer sometimes can be quite uncomfortable. But it's like you said there, ultimately for me, I'm not like a lifestyle client. Like, I do this as a competitor and I want to go pro next time I compete. So I want to hold myself to that standard. And so I will, and I'm sure you'd actually be the same with this. You'll let whatever is the kind of quote unquote more optimal route, like we can never know optimal, but probably the more advantageous route for muscle gain ultimately take you versus like preferences. Like the old saying, and we need to make a t-shirt on this at some point, otherwise RP will bring one out, won't they? The guys at Team Full Romp. Results are my preference. Like that will ultimately guide us, because I know last time, for me at least, when I came out of my contest prep before, I did a mini cut probably, I don't know, like 6 months after my show or something, which would be not too long away now. And I think it was just unnecessary for me. I think I was just in a good position to just keep moving up. So I think my mini cut will come when like my appetite starts to become an issue. That's kind of the big thing for me, where I'm just like, I don't want to have to push through like I did last time for months, because that was worse than prep. I don't think your off season should legitimately be worse than your contest prep in terms of like the symptoms you're feeling, or at least not for extended periods of time. I think if your body's giving you those signs when you're fighting to put on weight, I'm not sure it's kind of a little bit unhealthy. I think getting close to that for some individuals maybe makes sense. You can maybe make some arguments for it, but ultimately when we're talking about training performance being the driving factor, I think I took it to a point where like my sleep was being negatively impacted, and like once that sort of thing is happening, there's no way your training is as good as it could be. Like when I was at 180 pounds, so like 10 pounds or so above stage weight, my training's already in a good position. I don't need to push over 200 pounds. Like once I get over 200 pounds, my training is I'm no longer feeling my best. So I think like I will hover between 180 to 200 for most of my off-season. Probably sit around maybe 185 to 195 for the majority. Yeah.
And it would also be foolish to kind of pre-plan something like that in advance. Because otherwise you may take things too aggressively when you don't have to. Or something comes up, such as with me, I didn't expect to have another kind of couple of weeks where I need to take it a little bit slower due to injuries creeping up, or the severity of the injuries that I'm dealing with right now. That wasn't really on my radar. I planned in the surgery, yes, for sure, but I really planned of like, going into full steam afterwards, and now I need to take it a little bit lighter again. So yeah, I mean, you never really know what is about to happen. Sometimes you just have to take it as it comes. And that's also why I don't really get when people are stressing out big time about certain things, because you can't really plan that far in advance. Sure, you can have a general guideline or a general plan, but if you need to modify things, don't get stressed out about it. I mean, that is life. Everything in life is like that. So why are you stressing about something like bodybuilding, which requires patience anyway to begin with?
Yeah, I think it's, I think potentially bodybuilding, and people are attracted by the idea of like this sort of kind of periodization and like having accumulation, deload, all of that. It kind of attracts the obsessive personality, which I would definitely say I'm in that category, no doubt. And so it's quite easy for that person who's like has a bit of an obsessive perfectionist almost mindset, a little bit rigid, to then struggle to be flexible. Which I definitely, with my nutrition, struggled a lot at the past. Training is still something I'm like, but this, I don't know if I talked about it last time, but I extended this mesocycle by a week, taking 2 light sessions. That's been a really good kind of learning experience for me, in that I've implemented that with clients before, but not so much myself, because I'm a bit of a robot with my lifestyle and don't have anything going on that I'd need to adjust for. But doing it myself has been great to learn, like, oh, actually I can, that's like a legit tool that I can use, because, well, so far this training week's going really well. So yeah, it's nice to practice. I think it just, again, talks to practicing what you preach.
Yeah. How are things on your end, by the way?
Yeah, good. I'm not 2.5 kilos over stage. I'm more like 10 kilos almost. I'm not quite 10 kilos, maybe like 8 kilos, 9 kilos over stage weight now. So quite significantly above. I've actually just, someone asked me, because I put up some like progress photos, they were like, I'd love to see what you look like versus like stage ready to now. So I lined some up yesterday, so I'll do a post on that so people can see. But it's, yeah, I am happy with how I'm looking, but like I'm a lot softer. Like I have not got like chest striations anymore. I had quad striations for quite a while, like cross striations on the leaner quad. The other one went really fast. But they've completely gone now. I obviously still have those glute lines. I have a little bit of definition in the quads. Like you can see the outline of muscles, but I feel really good. And I've said it before, but I'm really, really conscious of making the most out of all my time and efforts. So I'm happy to actually be at a faster rate of gain than a slower rate of gain. I'm not above 0.5% per week, but I'm riding closer to that than at the slower end. And sometimes I catch myself wanting to slow things down, but for myself personally, happier being a bit faster and more assertive with that, knowing that I'm getting everything I need out of it and like putting it on my physique. It's kind of like, I don't know, the argument of as you get more advanced, slow your rate of gain because you've got less muscle to gain. And I'm almost like, the muscle is so much harder to gain. Let's give it everything I can so that I can put that muscle on and be sure. And that mindset and methodology for me in my last off season worked really well. So I'm just looking to basically rinse and repeat my previous off season, but still applying the lessons and things and takeaways. So yeah, I'm coming through my kind of overreaching week. Have a deload starting next week, as you mentioned. I am getting some more tattoos. I actually want to I haven't had the feedback of what the designs are looking like, so I'm a bit anxious to see those, to just see what they're looking like.
It's the same arm then?
It's going to be the same arm. I'm getting Ultra Instinct Goku on the hand. And then on the other side of the arm is Vegito. So I'm hoping Vegito is going to be doing a Kamehameha. So like shooting it out as if it's like coming off into like, I don't know, into the person looking at it. And then Ultra Instinct Goku just has like this look on his face. If you've kind of seen what he looks like, he just has like this, I don't know, angry look on his face that I just like. So yeah, hopefully I'll get that arm covered, but that will be Sunday and Monday, like 5 hours basically each time. So I was especially listening to someone like Jackson Pios, and obviously he's covered in tattoos, but he talked about like his mindset shift a little bit around life and how like tomorrow's never given. It's like a really horrible way to think about things. But I was also like, well, I like the idea of like the anticipation of more tattoos, but I've got a whole body that I could cover one for one. And also I'm like, they don't degrade, and I feel like I'm already behind in like people like yourself. I imagine the first one you got when you, I don't know how young you were. How 18. Young were you, Pascal? 18, exactly.
Whenever I was
32.
legally allowed to immediately into the tattoo parlor studio, and I had no idea about what a good tattoo is. It was this one here.
Oh wow! So you went in.
Yeah,
like that's not a small. That's actually, it doesn't look bad at all. Actually,
I've
seen that in person. Oh, does it?
Bad. Yeah. But that's all right. I mean, we all start somewhere. And if I could go back, of course, I would do things differently. But I'm also now nearly double the age. So, of course, things have changed.
So, yeah, I was just like I know I have more spaces I can cover. Yeah, your arms are probably like a prime spot for tattoos. But I was just like, man, let's just do this. It's the same with when I was doing things for this studio. Like sometimes I look at like the cost of things and stuff like that. And I'm just like, but I mean, I need to buy these sound panels, or I need some sound panels. I should invest in some decent ones. Or like ones I like the look of, like they're going to pay back. Like these are investments in myself. Like I see the same with like tattoos. Like it's not like a t-shirt that's going to like fade in like months time. So yeah, just my mentality shifted a bit around those sort of like life things, especially if I don't have kids, for one. Like you have children, they cost a lot of money. Like they take a lot of time. It's like, man, if I don't have kids, like I should be, like I need to use that like as a like I'm not saying I definitely won't have kids, but it's something for me and Charlotte to discuss more. But I'm like, I mean, if I'm not investing into that, I want to invest into other things and life experiences and make the most out of my situation. It just made me think about it a bit more, especially, I guess, yeah, once you pass 30, you start thinking about these things in a bit more depth.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is that lots of things that Jackson said in that podcast episode very much resonated with me, and are basically also the way that I look at things. So, and funny enough, here in the morning, just Katie and I were talking about an upcoming holiday for her. She has, like, I told you about that a very, very close group of friends in Magdeburg, and they are always like planning trips. And this year, because it didn't really happen over the past 2 years, they are finally actually flying somewhere else. It would be the first time for Katie to actually be separated from us and her kids for several days in a row, and even being in a different country. And she already is now struggling with that idea. And none of her friends, and they are all parents as well, has the mentality such as her. And I'm the same, and this is not coming from a helicopter background or so, where it's like, yeah, we always want to watch over our kids. But so Katie and I, we are basically the same when it comes to the mentality. I very much enjoy being around my kids, even though that it's the most stressful thing, the most time-consuming thing. It is also the most rewarding and lovely thing at the same time. And if you really think about it, I don't need to take a break from it now, simply because life will take care of that at some point eventually anyway. So in 10 to 15 years from now, the kids will do their own thing to begin with, or will do their own thing anyway. I don't need to do anything about this. This will automatically happen. So why am I now in a rush to actually get away from them when I have now the opportunity to spend time with them? At some point, that won't be the case anymore. So there are a couple of things in life that are very much certain. And one is, of course, everyone is being born and everyone will be dying, and some other things as well. And one of those things is, if you get kids, at some point they will leave you and they will do their own thing. And I'm not in a rush then to go on a holiday and be like, oh, finally a break from family. And I know people who are like that, who really take a week off from their family. And I'm not judging anyone, because it is a stressful thing, but I'm also under the opinion of like, this will only last like 10 years and then it's all over. And then you will look back and be like, oh, why didn't I make use of that time? Such as so many other things in life, where people are then regretting the things that they didn't do, when in reality, it was so easy to do those things actually in the first place. So for me personally, like exactly this, what it is that you said there. Of course, you can't live like YOLO mode each and every single day and live with the mentality of like, this could be your last day. Because otherwise you would do drugs, hookers, spend all of your money today because you don't know what will happen tomorrow. That's an unfeasible way of doing things. However, you can find a balance between those two, where you are spending something, you are enjoying things, while at the same time, though, you're also then planning for the future. But you never know how long you will be around and whether there will be a future where you can enjoy certain things. So you better make sure to also enjoy things here in the given moment.
Yeah, I think I don't know what the the saying is, but it's like it's so easy to get on that like hamster wheel where you're just continuously just moving forward. And I think there's times for that, and I don't think it's wrong, and I've certainly done that, and I'm sure you have as well. I'm sure a lot of people have, but I think it's good now and then, like you and Katie have these chats. Me and Charlotte, like we need to do it more actually, where we just like sit down and chat like, right, we haven't been on holiday for like 2-3 years or whatever, we haven't been abroad, let's plan something because we're both working hard, we have the cash or whatever, let's invest in ourselves and enjoy some time. And like, you shouldn't feel bad for that. And actually, it's funny, the thing I was thinking of when you said about like taking the time to have a break from your kids and then you come back and regret it, it makes me think of when people are in like contest prep and they're like hating the time and wishing it away almost. And like maybe they're like, I don't want to dig for 2 weeks to get that extra bit of fat off because it's just hard. And then they look back at it and they're like, man, it was only 2 weeks. I could have pushed for that time. I could have brought my best package. Maybe that meant they came second instead of first. So I like that mentality of like, it's almost like being present with what's happening now. Like make the most out of it. Or if I don't know, you're seeing family or something, rather than being on your phone, like spend the time with family because you maybe don't see them that frequently. I know I'm bad for that and I'm get better at that sort of thing. Or you're on a date with Katie, I'm on a date with Charlotte. Like you don't have time to yourselves that often without the kids, maybe for that short brief period. It's like, talk to Katie, don't like look at your phone or whatever. Not saying that's what you do, but I'm sure you have that sort of approach with things too.
And on that note as well, I mean, there's the saying of like, you won't regret the things that you did do, but you will regret the things that you didn't do, which isn't entirely true because there are lots of things that I do regret having done in my life. No, but thing is, I wouldn't know if I would regret it if I hadn't tried it, right? And just the fact alone that I did do it made me a more knowledgeable and more experienced individual. So I think everything that you're doing, even if it sucks, even if it's an awful experience, is an experience. And I think that when it comes to something like, I don't know, going through the contest prep, your example of like pushing through those 2 weeks, you will very unlikely regret it that you did it. But there's a high likelihood that you regret it that you didn't try it at least. And there are a couple of things that are like this in my life where I started something and now I look back. Now I'm in my mid-30s and I'm just thinking like, why did I stop? Why the hell did I stop? Why not just keep on going for like at least half an hour on a daily basis or maybe even weekly basis? And I would still be right now good at it because I kept on going. But the moment it became a little bit more challenging, I stopped. And I'm sitting here and think like, man, the most minimal approach to it would have still probably been more than me now looking back and regretting it.
Yeah, I can only agree with those sort of things. I don't know if we have time. I don't know if I feel like that kind of came to a close a little bit. I don't know if we have time. I'm conscious that we're meant to cover. I don't know how many muscle. Oh, sorry, Ada. I don't know how many muscle groups we have left.
Quite a lot, actually. We didn't cover delts. We didn't cover glutes. We didn't cover hamstrings. I thought that we covered hamstrings, but we didn't. Triceps. What else do we have? Abs. Calves.
Forearms.
We did do the forearms.
We did forearms, yeah.
I think we can actually then cover something like the triceps, for example. Or maybe the abs. Abs are a little bit easier and won't really take up too much of our time. So, as always, starting off exercise selection. What have you found worked the best, and what is something where you say like it's a waste of time?
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
So I've done a lot of abs in the past because my abs, they're okay now. I think they're always going to suck because I don't have, even like my left lower ab is not well developed, and it's just, I'm never going to have like a thick muscle there. It's just, I don't think I can even like contract anything there particularly. It's just never going to develop. So I think that's one thing I would initially say is like for abs, it's one of the more genetically determined muscle groups. Like you'll see people like someone like Matt Ogus, he's trained his abs, he's made them thicker, but he has a great just genetic starting point in terms of abdominal development. Like some people just have very symmetrical, thick, close together abs, whereas I have that like big gap between them. Like mine aren't symmetrical. And like I said, the one on my lower left is just like not present. I don't understand what's happening there. And people will say abs are made in the kitchen. And for sure, I understand where they're coming from in terms of if you have a bunch of body fat, you're not going to be able to see your abs. But everyone has abs, and you may have some really decent abs, and the thicker and more present they are, the more present they're going to be at higher body fat percentages. When we're talking about exercises, for me, I've really boiled it down to ones where I just get like flexion of the trunk, basically. So I'm looking to bring my upper chest or my clavicle to my pelvis and just kind of control that motion. I have, for the longest time, fucked up my ab training because I just bring in my hip flexors load. So I just think, the fullest range of motion. And I don't think about the abs. And this is a case where I would think about like active range of motion because you're isolating the abs. When I like come up past my pelvis, I'm just like starting to use hip flexors and actually take tension away from my abdominals. And they're just kind of taking over for a larger range of motion. So I found being kind of more in the active range for my abs and what motion they can do to have really helped. And then anything that lets me achieve that really works quite well. But I do find machines to be my preference because you can easily load those and it's a bit more manageable and known versus like, I don't know, like a V-up or like dragon flags or even hanging leg raises. Like sometimes they're fine and I use them intermittently, but I prefer if I can find like a good ab crunch machine. That's like the one I just like to just stick with. Or if you haven't got an ab crunch machine, then using a, what's it called? The cable machine and doing ab crunches on that, they can work pretty well. It's not quite as good, I don't think, as just sitting in a machine. Like if you've got a good ab crunch machine, that's what I miss. Actually, one of the machines I miss from Matrix in the gym, they actually have a really good one because that just works tremendously well. So yeah, exercises. I do like ab rollouts. They're one of the ones where they kind of have a huge like raw stimulus magnitude week one, and then I don't really get much soreness from them after that. I do like using those now and then, but they do sometimes like you feel it in the lats a little bit or in the triceps somewhat. So they're not like perfect, but you get a huge range of motion, really good stretch on those. But mostly, like I said, machine crunch and like any machines that you have available for the abs where you're kind of doing ab flexion work well. And then like a cable crunch. They're probably my two go-tos. I have really started to like decline crunches as well. They're very humbling. Like I see people, that's one of the exercises where I just use lots of hip flexors and I'd use like a lot of load. And I was like, man, I can load these up. But when I changed my form to be restricted to the active range and more so focusing on really using the abs, I was like, man, these are hard with like 3 kilos behind my head. I'm fucked. So that's been my experience.
No, absolutely. And there are so many things that we can touch on there. And so common mistakes basically is that a lot of people use way too much load and then they don't really feel it in their abs because they probably make use of other body parts instead of the abs themselves. And this is something that I immediately see when I have an athlete. I take a look at the spreadsheet and they use a very heavy load on something like cable crunches. I can immediately tell that person is probably not feeling it in their abs. What is then often happening is that they are reporting that they don't really feel it in their abs, right? So using much, much less load than you think you need is the way to go. So for example, also on crunches, right? Try to do them body weighted and try to really do them properly. It's the same when it comes to pull-ups. Chances are that you can't do like 20 pull-ups unless you're coming from a calisthenic background or you're super light or so. Chances are that you probably end up in the 10 to 15, and 15 is already very, very good range with full range of motion. Like getting to the stretch position, coming all the way up to the bar and then touching the bar with your chest. If you couldn't do like 10 to 15, you are very, very strong already on the pull-ups. Same goes for something like ab movements. I see it so often that people butcher it. And one thing that I'm always then saying is a quote of like, try to imagine being an armadillo, where you're just like rolling in. You really want to get that flexion going because this is basically the mechanism, right? You really want to get that flexion going. And that's why you can also then think about like rolling your lower back, right? And so many people still have that saying from the old days. I don't know, maybe it was in the 90s or so, that crunches are bad for your low back. And then you're not allowed to actually then round your back when doing a crunch. Like, what the fuck? Right? No. Roll in. Imagine being an armadillo. Really get into it, squeeze, and then come down under control. The same goes then for something like machine crunches, right? Another tip there is maybe if you have issues stabilizing things and you feel it more so in your hip flexors, turn around, face away from the tower, position your feet against the tower so that you have a stable ground in your hips, lock the hips in place, and then do the rounding on the abs. And with very, very much lighter loads than you first think that you need. Instead of using like the entire stack, maybe use 1/3 of the stack and tell me that it is worse, because most of the time it is. So, and other than that, it's more so like you said, I much more prefer like machine-based movements than body-weighted movements, because many people simply don't have the control or the strength to do something like the body-weighted movements, because they can be very, very challenging and very, very hard.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And one thing, you've mentioned it actually, I think it was for back training, but you can apply this to so many different lifts. But this is one where I find pausing in this shortened position, so in the contracted position, when your abs are basically as short and you've contracted them as much as you can, if you just pause that for a little bit, that gets the mind muscle connection really going, where you feel it in the abs, especially on like an ab crunch machine. I can just think like you bring your knees to your chest, like thinking about that. It's like, oh yeah, you get that good contraction. So yeah, I completely agree with that. I like the armadillo. It's making me think, what's the Pokemon that was like an armadillo? I'm trying to think what he was. Sandshrew.
I'm always thinking of this one when I'm actually talking to people.
Oh, are you? I love that. He was like a little tank.
Yeah, exactly. Going over to volume.
Sure. So with abs, to be honest, it depends on my client's preferences. Abs for me are in a category a little bit with calves. If they aren't a competitor, and they aren't kind of obviously having weak abdominals in terms of like muscular development, I'm not too worried about prioritizing them. I tend to have them on the back burner, just sitting around what I'd consider like a minimum effective volume, just because ab training isn't particularly fun. And a lot of people have fine abs just through big compound lifts, a little bit of isolation work, and they have their abs, as people say, made in the kitchen when they go through their fat loss phases. Then there are specific people, sometimes competitors like myself, where abs are clearly a weak point. So for those who I just sit around MEV, it's probably 3 sets a session, 2 to 3 maybe, sometimes depending on the movement, maybe even 1 if it's an ab rollout week 1, done like 2 times a week, maybe up to like sometimes I go up to 4, but that's normally the person who wants to really start prioritizing their abs. If they're just someone who just wants them to tick on the back burner, kind of similar like calves, they want them to grow, but they're not too fussed about it, then twice a week doing like 2 to 4 sets per session, and that's 10. So I just kind of stick there for the whole meso. But for me, kind of training my abs, when I prioritize them, I'd start putting them at the start of PM sessions a lot of the time, even the start of like upper body workouts if it didn't impact the kind of training that I was doing. I wouldn't do like abs at the start of a lower body workout. That's just going to lead to a bad time, because you're not going to be able to stabilize in anything. Imagine if your abs just the limiting factor on all your leg training. That would really suck. And then I work them similarly with a starting kind of set rate, like in a session, maybe 3 sets, and then moving up to maybe 5 within a single session, and done like up to, I think I moved up to 5 times a week at one point. I really, really pushed them. They just, for me, my abs just, they're one of those where it's almost like, I feel like I can almost do infinite. Like my mind switches off before my abs would switch off. It's kind of like my traps. Sometimes, no, calves. Normally my like feet give up before my calf muscle actually gives up, which is frustrating. But yeah, so I might move up to like probably max of 20 odd sets, maybe up to 25. But again, I'm not sure many people would mentally be able to like get into the zone for 25 sets on a week basis. And that's not like consecutive weeks, that's like max volume. But starting out around like anywhere for like more lifestyle clients, sitting around 6 to 8 sets per week. For me, I might start more like 8 to 14 sets and move up to like 16 to like 24 sets or something like that. Hopefully that was kind of made sense.
Absolutely. I agree with everything that you said there. I have nothing really to add other than giving an example of how I do things at the moment, because this is when people, or if people remember after the show, after the WMBF show, I said that I know what I want to improve, and apps are one of those things. And this is where I then also talked about a high amount of frequency that I'm then going to add, because I also do think that everything beyond like 3 to 4 sets becomes very challenging in a single session. More so from a mental perspective, because I simply don't enjoy training the abs, but I know that it has to be done. And that's why I'm not then able to push myself that much after like 2 to 3 proper sets. Everything beyond that is just like, I'm simply not there. There isn't intent behind the sets afterwards. That being said, I have a frequency of 5 times per week at the moment. I just don't do it in that one single leg session, simply because I'm actually having a lot of lower body movements already, where it's like I have lots of hamstring and glute movements alongside with then the quad movements, and it's just, I can't really be bothered at the end of it. The other session though, where I have like a quad dominant movement with only a little bit of hamstring work, this is where I then also add some abs. Other than that, I also have abs on pull and push days. So the frequency is quite high. And I think that this is something that many people can get away with as well. Frequency, though, is one where I would even say like ranging from 0 all the way to 6. If we just like take a typical routine or split. There are people who simply don't need ab training. It's just that. It's unfair. I know people who have freaking perfect abs, from the symmetry, from the size, and they don't do anything for them. And that's all right. It's unfair, but it's all right. And then, of course, some other individuals really need and want to actually bump it up to something like 6 times per week of training frequency.
I think it's good you introduce that naught, because quite often I will say for some people, like, this is optional. Like abs and calves, for some people, I'm just like, if they're really interested, sure. But for a lot of people, they're time limited anyway. Yeah. And I'm like, I prefer you to be, and I think they'd prefer to be putting that time and effort towards additional volume for the main muscle groups. And like abs and calves, they're going to maintain, if not for some people, grow a little bit just from the kind of core basics. That we're doing.
And then the question is like, if you're someone who would need some ab work, and that's why you want it in there, but you don't have the time, nor are you enjoying it. And most of the time, these two are correlated. People with shitty abs are most of the time the ones who also don't really enjoy ab training. That would also probably mean that you would need to bump up the frequency and the volume quite a decent amount. So the difference between like doing, 2 sets per week versus 0 is probably, it doesn't really make a difference then. And then you can really make the argument of like, either you do it properly or you don't.
And I think I just want to add here, because probably could have said this at the start, but I'm surprised when I see quite well-educated individuals with the opinion that like direct ab work is pointless. Like it's for a bodybuilder, it's pointless. And it's super surprising to me, because it seems like the abs are like a completely unique muscle and they don't respond to the same principles that other muscles do, but they do. And like proof is in the pudding with like my abs. I'm so glad that I prioritize them so much, because they improved so vastly much between 2017 to 2021. And they really help complete a bodybuilder's physique. And so now in my off season, I don't have to work so hard at them, because I've kind of made that groundwork up and I can put them a bit more on the back burner. Because have you seen that where like I feel like quite educated people have said like ab training is pointless for people. Like I'm like, oh, really?
Absolutely. I've seen that. And I think that this is just parroting, to be honest. It has been a misconception that has been ingrained in the fitness industry, such as other misconceptions. We all can think about those misconceptions about squatting past or beyond, with the knees beyond your toes or lower than 90 degrees, which we in our industry don't really think about anymore, about those misconceptions. We easily disregard those and call out the bullshit. But apparently we don't do it with other things that we may not have thought about that much or may not have seen in real life. So we then start to just like parrot on those kind of things. And there are probably things that I'm even saying or have said in the past that directly applies to. And I'm sorry for that, but that's just how we sometimes are. And I think that this is definitely one of those things that has been repeated so often that people just take it for granted and think that the person who is credible always has the experience or the anecdote to back it up, which not always is the case.
And then I guess the only thing to touch on here is rep range.
Yeah.
Like, do we need to touch on rep range? I'd say anything above 10 reps, really. Yeah. But this is one of those occasions where I've tried for, I think, every muscle group going above 20 reps. I've tried it. Abs doesn't really work. You just, hip flexors just start kicking in. It's kind of like, I don't know, like a hip hinge and trying to go much above like 10, 12 reps. When you start doing that, the lower back just takes over. So I find probably around 15 reps to be like my sweet spot in and around that place.
To be honest, that what I'm about to say though doesn't really apply into a normal program. But when I was working in that CrossFit box back in 2016, what they often did was one exercise. You're on that glute ham raise machine. You're locking in. You like in a reverse manner, and then you lean back so that you are kind of in a reverse manner towards the ground, and then you're picking up a medicine ball, and then you're touching your toes with that, coming back down, needing to touch the ground with a medicine ball, and coming all the way up to the feet again. This is an exercise that you did for like, I don't know, AMRAP, so as many reps as possible, and that made your abs burn hellishly. Thing is though, I don't think it's the most optimal approach of doing it, hypertrophically speaking. I think that this is an exercise, if you were to load it a little bit heavier even, then end up in the 10 to 20 repetition rate, it would possibly be even more effective, and you had half of the time that you spent doing it. But this was one of those exercises where I could say like, okay, higher repetition work on that exercise actually was working well for something like the abs, but everything else, don't know. And especially when someone is then saying like, hey, I'm able to do leg raises for like 20 plus reps. No, you can't. You just do them inappropriately.
Slow them down. Don't swing.
Don't
use
momentum. Exactly. Slow them down. Maybe have a peak contraction where you pause there, really focus on it, really lower it under control. Get a proper stretch in, come all the way up again. Hardly ever is anyone able to do this. And if so, then yeah, props to you.
But below 10 reps, I think I could definitely see some people finding above 20, especially if they're locked into like a machine, like you kind of described. I think that could work. I could see that. But below 10, I don't know if my abs would, I think something else would just take over if I was
That's
trying to
the thing with... So there
isolation.
Are muscle groups where I say like, and especially exercises where I say, all right, you want to focus on the mind-muscle connection. Then there are exercises just to make sure that you really hit that muscle group, because there's a high susceptibility that other body parts or muscle groups are taking over or aiding into the lift without you noticing in the moment. Then there are other exercises and muscle groups where I say like, don't worry about the mind-muscle connection, such as properly executed squats, for example. There is no way that the quads don't do a lot of the work or nearly all of the work. It's simply impossible. You don't need to have a great mind-muscle connection on something like this, right? It is just in the movement itself that they go through a great range of motion, and they are targeted and stimulated to a high extent. So don't worry about it on exercises like those, but especially those smaller isolationish kind of movements, you really want to make sure that you hit that muscle group and not everything around that, and joints, connective tissues, everything actually joins the party. No, it's a party for the triceps. It's not a party for the biceps and the delts and all that kind of stuff. The other ones need to actually stay outside.
And I think this is where that kind of the feedback, the biofeedback almost of like the pump and the disruption can like be great. So if you finish an ab like exercise, you pop off there, and if you don't feel like your abs have done something and you feel it like in your hip flexors, that's not a good sign. Yeah. You want to have felt it like through the abs, because the hip, like, things can definitely take over. So yeah, very well said.
Absolutely. Cool. Then abs done. Cool.
Tick.
Then we have that as well. I'm turning all of these into also a newsletter series. So if anyone is interested, you can sign up for the newsletter. I will then send it out at some point. I'm not ready because we haven't really finished as of yet, but I will turn those into a written format as well, so that everything is summarized and you can always go back, look at it as well, so that you can take some of those things that we are talking about and apply it to your program as well. And
that's awesome.
If it was too confusing, though, too much information, because it is kind of a lot of information if you really dissect it per body part, you can always apply it to our coaching services. We always have an open ear to your concerns, to your struggles and issues. Head over to revivestronger.com/online coaching, sign up, and let's schedule a call. And on that note, we are now coming to the end of this episode. Steve, do you have any kind of other things that you wanted to say?
No, only sorry if you didn't pick up your ticket for the London seminar yet, because the early bird has finished, but you can still get tickets. There'll still be some available. So if you're still kind of unsure about it, thinking about it, then drop us a question if you have any questions. But otherwise, yeah, I hope to see you there. I don't think I have anything else in particular. Yeah. I'm excited for it and excited to see so many faces.
Me too. So far, we are now 80 people. And Steve and I, to be very, very honest, we didn't really have any kind of anticipation of how this will go down, simply because of everything that happened over the past 2 years. We didn't know whether people are willing to travel. We didn't know how people feel about sitting in a room with other people, etc., etc. So we just took it as it comes, and now here we are, already with 80 participants, which is freaking amazing. So thank you very much for everyone who has purchased a ticket, and thank you in advance to everyone who will purchase a ticket in the future.
Yes, I'm very excited for it. Let's go.
Cheers, guys.
All right. Cheers, guys. So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Steve. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.